The Varn Dominion had fought countless wars across the Spiral Arms, but none confused them more than the Terran resistance. They were not the most powerful species. Their technology, while effective, lacked the elegance of the Varn. And yet, they were infuriatingly stubborn. No matter how many colonies were scorched or fleets disabled, the humans never submitted. They adapted, survived, retaliated. But this time, the Varn thought they had found a weakness. A human captured alive. Recon Sergeant Elias Kane had operated deep behind Varn lines before. He knew the risks. But when a low-level distress beacon lured his unit into the dead canyons of Vero Prime, it wasn't a trap. They had walked into an experiment. His team was vaporized in an orbital sweep. He was spared, but only barely. A paralysis net locked every synapse in his body, and by the time he regained consciousness, he was strapped to a metallic frame in a chamber of sterile gray. The air smelled like burned minerals and antiseptic. Four-limbed silhouettes studied him through a translucent membrane. They didn't speak. They observed. Recorded. Adjusted. Elias didn't scream when the neuroprobes pierced the base of his skull. The Varn noted this. They escalated. Each session was calculated, timed to his circadian rhythms, designed to break his internal clock. The worst wasn't the pain. It was the silence. They never asked questions. Never delivered threats. Just methodical invasions of body and mind, like a science project. A dissection in real time. Commander Zeltor watched from behind a polarized panel. He'd dissected 20 species in his rise through Varn Command, but humans fascinated him. Their neurochemistry didn't match their emotional volatility. They endured pain longer than they should have. Elias had now been under duress for 17 cycles, far longer than standard collapse markers. Fascination shifted to frustration. One day, Elias opened his eyes mid-procedure. His voice was cracked and dry, but it cut through the clinical stillness. "Protocol Ghost," he muttered. The Varn medic turned to Zeltor. They hadn't encountered this phrase in any previous subjects. Zeltor dismissed it. A psychological deflection, perhaps a tribal superstition. Meaningless. The torture resumed. Elias was starved, electrostimmed, deprived of REM cycles. They liquefied meals in front of him, filtered smells into the air to trigger hunger responses. Still, he said nothing more. He only repeated the same phrase once, with less breath. "Protocol Ghost." The Varn translated it. The word ghost puzzled them. It referred to a human myth, the dead who linger. Irrelevant. Zeltor filed it as psychological nonsense and increased the intensity. Neural nodes were overloaded. Muscles atrophied. Veins ruptured. Still, Elias never gave them what they wanted. Because they had never told him what they were after. He had no mission details to protect. Just time to endure. And finally he died. Not with defiance. Not in rage. He simply expired. Quietly. No outburst. No final speech. His vitals stopped. And that was it. The chamber fell silent. The Varn removed his body with mechanical precision. Logs were updated. Another failed specimen. Data catalogued. The humans had shown surprising resistance, but they had not retaliated. No fleet came. No signal. Not even a diplomatic warning. The Dominion interpreted this as a success. They began drafting memos for higher command. Human retaliation threshold weaker than anticipated. They celebrated restraint as a victory. One warlord even joked at a briefing. "If this is the extent of their fury, we'll break them with patience." But something lingered. In the lower halls of the medical archive, a junior aide stared at the phrase logged in Elias's file. "Protocol Ghost." He brought it up to his superior, who waved it off as codeword hallucination. The aide considered purging the note from the database. Instead, he left it. After all, what harm could come from a dead man's muttering? 3 days later, the prison lab was locked down after a system anomaly. Lights flickered. One of the security staff vanished during patrol. No signs of conflict. No alarms. Just gone. Internal audits flagged it as a desertion. Then another technician failed to report in. By the fourth disappearance, motion sensors were showing activity, but nothing was captured on thermal. Just fluctuations. Ghosts in the system. Zeltor was too preoccupied with his next interrogation scheduled to notice. He reviewed Elias's files again, scrolling past the logs of neural resistance and metabolic adaptations. At the bottom, the same phrase. Protocol Ghost. He snorted. He had seen their best. Heard their threats. Humanity did not scare him. What could one word possibly mean? He closed the file. Behind the thick walls of Viral Prime, far beneath the main structure, a single ID tag rested on a tray near a decom tank. It was caked in dried blood. Human blood. And it had just been removed from cold storage. The Dominion's War Council convened in a polished obsidian chamber above the clouds of Veltrax. Massive data structures pulsed with intelligence reports. The capture and termination of the human operative had been logged, analyzed, and archived. All factions agreed. Humanity would issue a statement. Threats, condemnations, perhaps even a retaliatory strike. That was the pattern of primitive species. But Earth remained silent. No military formation. No intercepted orders. No signal flares of diplomatic outrage. Just silence. The Varn mistook it for hesitation. Their analysts theorized that humanity, though defiant, lacked centralized conviction. A civilization of reaction, not preemption. The data was interpreted through arrogance. The humans feared escalation. Zeltor received commendation for his effectiveness. The Dominion deemed it a soft victory. One less threat to manage. The silence, however, wasn't an accident. It was by design. On Earth's lunar defense grid, a series of black-coded pings echoed through a secure relay. They didn't travel across known networks. No humans monitored them. They were instructions buried within protocols never acknowledged in peacetime. Autonomous, invisible, and irreversible. Protocol Ghost was live. In an underground node far beneath Mare Tranquillitatis, a vault opened with no ceremony. Inside, one man stood. No rank, no identifier, no record in any database. DNA scrubbed. Medical history redacted. A human weapon no one spoke of, because even knowledge of him was restricted to algorithmic discretion. He was not created for war. He was created for erasure. His body was lean, functional. Every movement was silent, intentional. Muscles conditioned not for strength, but for endurance and control. His face was unreadable. Behind his eyes lived no joy, no anger, only purpose. He had not been used in years. Now he was awake. An AI node, referred to only as 0, outlined the target parameters. Viral Prime. Minimal planetary defense. No wide-scale military presence. Just a high-security research facility and a record of recent termination involving operative Elias Kane. The man said nothing. He blinked twice, indicating command confirmation. 0 initiated deployment. Meanwhile, across the Dominion, attention turned inward. Civil disputes on the Chorus front. Trade negotiations with the Othel Run. Minor flare-ups across contested border regions. No one tracked the human operative's death beyond a cold note in the data ledger. The Varn, like many empires before them, had fallen victim to their own metrics. They believed they understood humanity. What they measured was weapons. Ships. Strategies. They never measured grief. They didn't quantify loyalty. And they never considered what Earth might do if they stopped caring about being seen. The man, classified internally as Ghost, landed without announcement. His drop wasn't noticed. There were no tremors. No re-entry trails. Just a piece of dust slipping through the cracks. 0 synchronized his systems en route. AI-assisted neuromapping engaged. Suit calibration complete. Biomass signature reduced. Adaptive filtration at 0.001 emissions. He moved like water through vacuum. Every step predicated on silence. No footsteps, no digital trails. Every molecule of his presence was an absence. Ghost didn't carry identification. He didn't need orders. His objective wasn't revenge. It was rectification. Elias's death had not been about strategy. The Dominion hadn't extracted military advantage. They had simply wanted to study pain. This, more than anything, triggered the deployment. Not because they won, but because they treated suffering as data. That violated the oldest line in human doctrine: you do not break what we protect. The Dominion mistook that silence as submission. What they failed to understand was that humanity's loudest signal was no signal at all. Back on Earth, no reports were drafted. No internal briefings were circulated. The President was not informed. Ghost's movements bypassed all human institutions. He wasn't part of the army. He wasn't part of the government. He was part of the unspoken pact that if Earth was ever touched in a certain way, something would be sent to unmake the act. His memory wasn't weighted with faces. It was weighted with function. Kane's file had been transmitted. Not the mission, not the failure, just one clip, his final recorded biometrics. Silent. Still. Heart slowing. Then flatlining. Ghost watched it once. That was enough. He initiated final phase lock. No return signal requested. His capsule became his tomb unless otherwise instructed. Zero processed the command with zero hesitation. All Dominion systems remained unaware. Border patrols reported nothing. No starship maneuvers. No mobilizations. The human frontier remained deceptively still. A Dominion analyst joked in a closed channel. "They're too soft for retribution." The log would later be corrupted, then deleted. Ghost had landed. And the silence was over. Atmosphere, heat, kinetic motion, none of it registered. No alarms sounded. No sensors tripped. Ghost's arrival wasn't detected because there was nothing to detect. He had no signature, no thermal bloom, no EM field. The Dominion surveillance grid, designed for fleets and infiltration drones, had never been calibrated for a man who was trained to be unreadable. Ghost moved through the terrain without leaving marks. His suit mapped topography in microseconds, adjusting pressure and posture to reduce environmental impact. His boots applied counterforce to cancel out weight distribution. Even the wind didn't react to his presence. The outermost guard post was a Varn security node positioned for redundancy. It was gone in 30 seconds. No weapon was used. No wounds were left. Just one less dot on their internal roster, dismissed as a sensor error. Ghost didn't advance linearly. He shifted angles every 12 meters, following a randomized motion algorithm to avoid pattern recognition. Dominion systems relied on predictive logic. Ghost didn't give them one. Inside the facility, Zeltor remained unaware. The incident logs showed minor anomalies, biometric drift in patrol routes, one missing drone. Dismissed again. Small issues. Nothing worth escalation. That assumption persisted because the humans had always followed a visible chain of actions. Ships. Statements. Negotiations. This wasn't that. Second kill, perimeter commander. The Varn elite wore adaptive armor, trained in environmental warfare. It didn't matter. His last moment was an unregistered breath before full synaptic shutdown. No marks. Zero kill. The kind that left corpses looking asleep. The internal AI systems pinged command once. That ping never arrived. Ghost disabled all external comm links before infiltration. He didn't use brute force. He injected code fragments into the environmental AI, convincing it that everything was operating within tolerances. Ventilation remained stable. Power loads remained unchanged. Heat signatures matched logged values. Every kill was recorded only by Ghost's internal system. Not for trophy. For confirmation. Targets weren't random. They were listed, those involved in Elias's detention, observation, and termination. No collateral. No drift. Names. Faces. Functions. He reached the lab sector in 42 minutes. Door access required no breach. He had already acquired bioauthentication from a previously neutralized scientist. DNA was replicated through his suit's reactive film. The door opened like it would for a regular shift rotation. Inside, the holding chambers were empty. Ghost navigated the corridors in silence, ignoring data panels, avoiding scans. He didn't need intelligence. He needed confirmation. It was found near the cryo dump. Chamber 14B. Elias Kane, terminated. Record, non-compliant. Body returned to stasis. Ghost stood before the cryovault. He didn't open it. He already knew. The internal data pulse showed failed resuscitation and decay markers. The Dominion hadn't preserved the body out of respect. They catalogued it for analysis. Tools were still attached to his skull. Ghost removed the ID tag with one motion. It still carried blood. The metal was slightly warped, like it had been clutched tightly in a final moment. Zero pinged his feed. Asterisk. Target eliminated. Mission complete. Asterisk. Ghost responded manually. Asterisk. Correction. Mission begins. Asterisk. The AI adjusted operational parameters. New rule sets applied. Movement protocols shifted. He was no longer avoiding detection. That phase was complete. Phase 2 initiated, elimination and message. He uploaded a compressed spike into the local AI node. It would silently infect the Dominion's entire research network, scrambling logs, falsifying biometric records, and removing any evidence of his presence. The facility would remain blind even after it was burning. Ghost began backtracking, but not toward extraction. Toward Command Core. He encountered 2 Varn officers in the southern corridor. Both attempted activation of neural defenses. Useless. Ghost's suit already cycled at counter-frequency. They died instantly. He left the bodies visible. Not out of impulse. Out of precision. By the time internal sensors recalibrated, 22 personnel were missing. No alarms had triggered. The remaining staff were frozen, unable to comprehend what had breached their fortress. In the Dominion's psychological warfare model, fear was statistical. Measured by output variables like reaction time and auditory stress indicators. But Ghost didn't produce fear through visuals or threats. He induced it through subtraction. Things disappeared. Systems broke down. Familiarity collapsed. No one knew what was coming. Only that it was silent, efficient, and inevitable. The last message Ghost transmitted to Earth was a flat signal. Asterisk. Kane recovered. Phase escalation approved. Asterisk. He attached the ID tag scan. Transmission complete. Then he vanished again. The core systems failed in sequence too fast for diagnostics. Lights dimmed, then flickered into patterns the Dominion engineers couldn't decipher. Internal alarms remained silent. Not suppressed, reprogrammed. The AI, trusted to regulate environment and response, now looped false reports of operational stability. Those who noticed discrepancies didn't last long enough to report them. Security teams mobilized too late. Half their personnel were already gone, names blinking red on attendance logs. Ghost had moved deeper. He bypassed lock sectors with recoded credentials pulled from terminated staff. His entry didn't alert doors. Each room recognized him as authorized, right until the last observer ceased to exist. He moved toward the command node with full precision. The facility's senior officers attempted to initiate lockdown, but the sequence was already overwritten. Ghost's implanted logic spike had convinced the system it was mid-maintenance. Every emergency command was rerouted to an invalid node that didn't exist. They were sealed inside their own structure. He flooded the ventilation system with a tailored bioagent. Not lethal, paralyzing. It acted on the Varn nervous system, silencing motion and voice within seconds. Antidotes were bypassed. Their filtration units trusted the AI that now obeyed Ghost. Some tried to fight back. They failed without understanding why. Their weapons, regulated by security imprint, refused activation. Their aim faltered as the paralysis set in. Even escape became a foreign concept. Doors locked behind them. Corridors rerouted. What they had built to control others now constrained them. Command feeds displayed images with no source, grainy loops of familiar corridors now empty. Audio played back slowed versions of previous conversations, distorted to resemble whispers. One officer attempted to disable the system by triggering an EMP. The charge never initiated. Ghost had already bypassed the ignition protocol, repurposing the wiring to disable backup power once the command failed. Zeltor remained in his private quarters. The only part of the structure was standalone access. He reviewed kill reports, still unaware. His confidence faltered when his console stopped responding. The message was subtle, a return to the login screen. One word replaced the VARN interface, *. Witness. *. His request to override failed. The lights dimmed. His breathing changed. The door opened with no sound. Ghost entered without pause. He didn't offer words or pause for effect. His presence was a sentence being carried out. Zeltor reached for a defense module on his wrist, useless. Ghost had already fried the chamber's power conduit through a subgrid overload triggered minutes earlier. Zeltor tried to speak. His voice caught. Not because of fear, but because of the neuromicrocharge Ghost had laced into the room's ventilation. The commander was awake, alert, conscious, but paralyzed. Ghost walked forward with methodical calm. He scanned the chamber. On a display shelf, biological remains. Trophies from previous dissections. Including Elias's extracted tooth, suspended in a containment field. That field was disabled with a tap. Ghost retrieved the object and placed it in his side pouch. No ceremony. From his suit, Ghost extended a single filament blade. It wasn't standard. It was the same tool used in VARN torture procedures. Reconfigured, sharpened to atomic thinness. He stepped forward and drove the blade in slowly, silent and clean. Zeltor couldn't scream. His body reacted with convulsions he couldn't initiate. The cut was precise, separating core neural threads without full termination. Conscious paralysis. Ghost looked directly at him. No hatred. No satisfaction. Just silence. He turned and walked away. As he exited, the chamber began to collapse. The compound's power core had been redirected. A logic bomb planted in the system during his infiltration now engaged. Failsafes were overridden. Emergency shutdowns required biometric access from 3 officers. 2 were dead, the third locked behind 30 tons of sealed alloy. The main reactor surged. From above, the Dominion satellites monitoring Vero Prime reported nothing. All systems still reported operational status. No visual of explosion. No heat signature. Just quiet. Then the feed went dark. The report transmitted to Central Command read only one sentence. Power node maintenance complete. It was marked low priority. Ghost was already gone. The Dominion sealed all records related to Vero Prime within 36 hours. Official cause of destruction was listed as core instability due to outdated infrastructure. The explanation was thin, but sufficient for bureaucratic dismissal. No investigation was launched. The few who privately questioned the inconsistencies were reminded of clearance levels and budget priorities. The matter was buried under newer conflicts. Still, unease grew. Field operatives whispered about missing personnel. Supply routes redirected without explanation. Tactical maps updated quietly, removing the region without ceremony. No one used the word retaliation. They didn't need to. The absence spoke louder. Diplomatic requests to Earth were met with silence. No escalation, no protest, not even denial. Human representatives continued standard communication protocols, deliberately neutral. The incident was never acknowledged. No inquiry ever reached Terran channels. Behind closed circuits, Dominion Command recognized a pattern. Not in destruction, but in restraint. Something had occurred that required erasure. Not just of evidence, but of memory. Entire routines rewritten to avoid retracing steps. Protocols altered to prevent repeat engagement. A silent adjustment to doctrine. Earth was now treated as unpredictable, not because of strength, but because of what it chose not to show. On Earth, no news coverage emerged. No internal memos circulated. No department logged victory. The data didn't exist. Not in encrypted files, not in archival storage. The operation had no origin, no chain of command. It had been executed outside the known structure, and it would not be repeated, not because of failure, but because it had never officially begun. The capsule returned 2 weeks later. It landed without notice. Ground crews ignored it. Airspace regulators found no trace. The system that handled off-record deployments accepted its return, logged a completion signal, and wiped its own storage. Ghost walked away without surveillance. No escort. No debrief. He entered a building with no designation and handed over a small pouch containing Elias Kane's ID tag and a preserved tooth. The items were placed in a black container and sealed. No label marked the surface. The vault accepted the box and rotated it inward, where thousands of other unmarked boxes waited, identical and silent. An automated voice, not human, not synthetic, simply stated, "Memory retained. Task concluded." Ghost nodded once. He didn't remain. There were no ceremonies, no commendations. The program didn't allow repetition. His presence was temporary. His activation a conditional anomaly. There would be no second deployment unless something again crossed the threshold. He returned to the place where he waited before. No one else entered. No one asked questions. The world above continued its orbit. Markets opened. Diplomats debated. Civilizations thrived. All unaware that an entire facility, and everyone within it, had been unmade in response to a single death. Zero, the AI that managed Ghost-level events, documented final confirmation. The log was sealed in an analog capsule and fired into the Kuiper Belt, unrecoverable and untrackable. That log contained only one phrase. Never provoked. Only answered. Across the Dominion, subtle changes took root. Patrol routes rerouted around human colonies. Negotiations fast-tracked. Resource conflicts de-escalated. The cost of confrontation was no longer theoretical. It had been demonstrated, not through fleets or firepower, but through precision and silence. Those in command understood the message wasn't destruction. It was surgical absence. An ability to enter, alter, and exit without trace. Not for conquest, not for leverage, just for correction. In time, legends emerged. Smuggled through back channels and anonymized forums. Tales of a human who could not be tracked. Whose presence meant termination without explanation. Most dismissed them. Some didn't. No visual existed. No voice ever recorded. No name ever spoken. But those who had authorized Elias Kane's torture never authorized another. They didn't need to be told. Back in the vault, the system checked the box one final time. Temperature stable. Seal unbroken. It did not scan the contents again. It didn't need to. At the bottom of the box, beside Kane's ID tag, a single phrase was etched in microtext, visible only under spectral contrast. We don't speak. We don't warn. We remove.